Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. Welcome to Islamicus, the index of Islamic knowledge. Here we explore the beauty, depth, and wisdom of Islam by studying Tafheem-ul-Quran, the remarkable commentary by Syed Maulana Maududi. Join us as we uncover the timeless guidance and profound insights that connect faith, reason, and everyday life.
Today, we're doing something maybe a bit different, a shortcut, really. We want to build that foundational understanding you need before diving into one of the world's most studied, most revered texts, the Qur'an. But also, let's be honest, one that can be structurally confusing at first glance. We're not getting into theology today, just the architecture, how it's put together.
Exactly. And we're using a fantastic guide for this, the preface, the Muqaddama from the Tafheem-ul-Quran commentary. It's really important to get this. The author didn't write this preface for the Qur'an itself.
Right.
It was specifically for his commentary, aiming to help the everyday reader get past those initial, intellectual blocks and that structural confusion that can genuinely keep people stuck on the surface for years.
Oh, absolutely. Those hurdles are so real. You pick it up for the first time, start reading, and it feels like it jumps all over the place. So today's mission is basically to clear up that confusion. The source itself says it can leave people remaining on the surface level of meaning for years. We need to understand how it's built so we can approach it correctly, realizing, okay, this isn't a standard book.
That's the core issue. The source flags right away. The reader comes in expecting something conventional. A book with a single clear subject, neatly divided into chapters, abwab, and sections.
Useful like a history book or a law text where everything follows in sequence?
Precisely. You expect a linear argument. But that's not what the Quran delivers stylistically.
Okay, so let's dig into that unique style. What exactly hits the reader that makes them feel disoriented?
Well, it's this incredible mix of themes that seem, on the surface, unrelated or presented without warning. You could be reading about core beliefs, itikad, and then bam, it shifts to moral guidance, akhlaq.
Or a legal ruling, akam.
Or an invitation, dawah. Or a stark warning, takwif. There may be a story from history, kakawis. Or it points you towards signs in the universe, athari kainet. All quite suddenly.
And it's not just the topics changing, it's the way they change. Like one subject, it gets interrupted by another, or even who's speaking and who's being spoken to can shift back and forth.
Exactly. The speaker might change. The audience being addressed changes. It moves from addressing the prophet to the believers to opponents, sometimes with a few lines.
So if you're looking for that neat academic structure, you're gonna be lost.
Completely. The source points out, look, historical bits aren't written like modern history writing. Legal principles aren't laid out like a legal code with articles and subsections. And if you try to force that expectation onto it,
you'll either dismiss it as disorganized, or maybe worse, you'll try to create these artificial links between verses that aren't really there, and you miss the actual flow.
Right. You miss the intended meaning.
Okay, so the structure isn't conventional. How do we get the right framework then? The source says there are 6 things, 6 prerequisites that a new reader often lacks.
Yes, 6 keys. The author is very direct about this. You can't really grasp the wisdom scattered throughout if you don't see the bigger picture. You need to understand the subject of the book, its overall purpose or goal, the malarvado, the central theme that ties it all together.
And then the stylistic expression we just talked about, the specific terminology it uses, and crucially, the background or context the pasmans are for the statements being made.
Without those 6 elements, it's like trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle without ever seeing the picture on the box lid. You just have pieces.
Okay, let's build that picture then. Let's start with the context. Before we even get to specific instructions, we need to understand the book's own origin story, its narrative engine. The source insists, whether you believe it or not, you have to start here to understand its logic.
This is the starting point, the asl. And it's built on 3 core premises, really non-negotiable from the text perspective. First, vicecurancy or khalifa. The idea that God created humans with intellect, choice, freedom. Yes, autonomy, and a specific kind of delegated authority on earth. Humans are God's representatives, his khalifa.
And that idea of being a representative, a vicegerent, immediately implies responsibility, doesn't it? Which leads straight to the second premise.
The test. Life is an examination. If you have delegated authority, you're being tested on how you use it. God is the ultimate sovereign, the judge. Success, which means eternal joy or jannah, comes from following the guidance he provides. That's Islam. Submission.
And failure.
Failure, resulting in eternal loss or dozak, comes from deviating from that guidance.
So we have the setup, vicegerency, the situation, a test. What's premise 3? It must be about what went wrong.
It is deviation. The idea is that the first humans, Adam and Hawa, were given the correct guidance, the right path. But later generations, well, they lost it, either through just carelessness, negligence, or sometimes actively corrupting it with malice.
And this loss, this corruption, led to the main problem the Qur'an addresses.
Exactly. It led directly to polytheism, shirk associating partners with God, essentially challenging his sole sovereignty, and also to the creation of flawed, self-made human laws and systems. Because humanity kept falling into this pattern, God sent messengers, prophets, Nabi, throughout history.
Different nations at different times.
Correct. All trying to restore that original correct path. Until finally, Muhammad, peace be upon him, was sent, not just to remind, but to actually establish a community, an ummah, that would live entirely according to this divine law.
Okay, that's the grand narrative framing everything. So if that's the story the book tells about itself, what does it make the actual subject of the Qur'an?
The subject is us, human beings. Specifically, it's about our falah, our ultimate success, welfare, prosperity, and our khusran, our ultimate loss, failure, ruin. It's fundamentally about what makes humans succeed or fail in the biggest possible sense.
Ah, okay. So if that's the subject, then the seeming structural confusion starts to make sense. The central theme becomes laser focused.
Right. The central theme is essentially this. All human ideas, systems, behaviors that are based on guesswork, speculation, or just following desires. They're not just wrong, they're factually incorrect and ultimately self-destructive.
And the only correct path, the only path that leads to falah, is the divine one revealed through the prophets.
That's the core message.
Yeah.
And therefore, the purpose, the mada, is simple: to invite humanity back to that path, to clarify the guidance that was lost or twisted over time.
Which brings us back beautifully to the structure. Why the mix of topics? The source uses a great analogy here, the necklace analogy.
Yes, it's very helpful. The Qur'an talks about the cosmos, about history, about ethics, legal matters, but not primarily to teach science or history or philosophy as academic subjects in themselves.
They aren't separate modules.
Exactly. They're like different kinds of gems, diverse, beautiful, valuable, but they're all strung together on a single thread. That thread is the central purpose: inviting humanity to succeed, falah, and avoid ruin, khusran.
So, a story about a past prophet isn't just history. It's an illustration of the consequences of following or rejecting the path. A mention of the stars isn't just astronomy. It's pointing to God's power to ground the central message.
Precisely. Each element serves the core purpose of clearing up misconceptions and reinforcing the invitation.
Okay, that clarifies the content and the why behind the variety. But what about the delivery? We know it wasn't handed down as one complete book. It came piece by piece over 23 years. The Kayfiyat and Nuzul, the quality of its descent.
This is absolutely critical. You have to remember, this text was the living guide for an active, ongoing movement, a dawah. It wasn't revealed into a vacuum or for people sitting quietly in a library.
It was dynamic.
Extremely dynamic.
Yeah.
And as the movement situation, needs, and challenges changed, the revelation adapted. This is clearest when you look at the two main phases, Makki and Madani.
Right. Tell us about those. How did the style and content shift?
The Makki phase, roughly the first 13 years in Makkah, was really about laying the groundwork, preparing the prophet, instilling the absolute core beliefs, oneness of God, the hereafter, correcting the specific local pagan beliefs, building basic ethics in the very first followers.
And the style reflected that.
Very much so. The source describes it as intensely rhetorical, often poetic, sweet, using imagery and history familiar to the Makkan Arabs, designed, as it says, to penetrate hearts like an arrow. Although later Makki revelations definitely reflect the growing tension and conflict with the establishment.
Then came the Hijra, the migration to Medina, and everything changed. The small persecuted group became a community, essentially a state.
A complete transformation. And the Madani phase, the next 10 years or so, reflects that new reality. The style often shifts. You get fiery oratory addressing battles and political situations. You get what sound like royal decrees establishing laws, detailed instructions for organizing society.
And dealing with new groups too.
Yes, addressing hypocrites within the community, the munafiqan, engaging in detailed arguments with the people of the book, Jews and Christians, laying down comprehensive social, economic, political laws, and, importantly, preparing this new community for the task of global reform. The text was responding in real time,
Understanding this context, revelation tied to an active movement helps solve another puzzle for new readers. The repetition, the tukrar. Why repeat core themes like Tawheed, oneness of God, Akhira, the afterlife, Taqwa, God consciousness, over and over? Isn't it inefficient?
It might seem that way if you think of it as a textbook.
Yeah.
But the source argues that for an active movement, especially one facing constant challenges and needing to grow, repetition is vital. Imagine if those core principles were mentioned just once early on.
They'd get lost. People would forget the foundations under pressure.
Exactly. The spirit of the movement would fade. So repeating these core ideas, Tawheed, accountability, the prophetic mission, but often with fresh wording, new angles, different contexts.
It keeps them alive. It reinforces them constantly.
It prevents burnout, while ensuring the foundational beliefs remain absolutely central. The repetition isn't redundancy. It's reinforcement essential for a living movement.
Okay, that makes sense. But here's a follow-up. If the revelation was so tied to the development of the movement over time, why isn't the final order of the chapters, the tartib we read today, chronological? Wouldn't that preserve the context best?
That's a really common and logical question. The source explains it this way. The chronological order, the order of descent, was perfect for the needs of the movement as it was growing. It matched the stages of development.
But the final order serves a different purpose.
Yes. The final arrangement, which mixes Makki and Madani chapters, sometimes placing later Madani sections right alongside early Makki ones, serves the purpose of completion. It's designed for the reader who now has the entire revelation.
Ah, so it gives a holistic view.
Precisely. It ensures the reader gets a comprehensive, integrated understanding of Islam as a complete system. It prevents someone from getting stuck with, say, only the early Makki emphasis and missing the later legal and social dimensions, or vice versa. It avoids a one-sided picture.
And the source is clear that this final order wasn't just decided by later scholars.
No, it emphasizes this was divinely directed. The prophet himself, acting on instruction from God, told the scribes exactly where each new piece of revelation should be placed within the existing text. So the final sequence is considered deliberate and part of the revelation itself.
Okay, fascinating. So for someone learning who now gets the architecture, the context, the delivery method, what's the recommended way to actually study this text, according to the source?
Well, the author gives some very practical advice. Rule number 1, he says, is to empty the mind. Try to approach it with an open heart, setting aside your preconceived notions, whether those are positive biases or negative ones.
Don't go in looking just to confirm what you already think or only to find fault.
Right, because if you do, you're not really reading the text. You're just projecting your own ideas onto it.
Okay, empty the mind. What's next?
The initial double read. He strongly suggests reading the entire Qur'an through, maybe relatively quickly, at least twice, just to get a feel for the whole thing, the entire sweep of its message, its system of thought and action.
Don't get bogged down in details on the first pass.
Exactly. Make notes of your questions, sure, but hold off on deep analysis or judgment. The source makes a key point here. Often, the answer to a question raised by an earlier verse becomes crystal clear when you encounter a later verse. Let the text explain itself first.
Good advice. Get the big picture before dissecting the details, and after that initial comprehensive view.
Then comes thematic study. This is where you start digging deeper. It involves focused note-taking, comparing verses on specific themes across the entire text. For example, you might track, what are the characteristics of people God favors versus those he condemns?
Or mapping out the principles of success, falah, versus the principles of ruin, khusran, wherever they appear.
Yes. Or outlining the framework for social life or political principles. This comparative approach helps you see how integrated the whole system is.
But the source adds a really crucial, maybe even challenging point. Even with the best study method, open mind, double read, thematic notes, there's still something missing if you just stay in your study in your armchair.
Yes, this is fundamental to the author's perspective. The missing ingredient is practical action, Remember, the Qur'an presents itself as a book of dawah, an invitation, a call to action, a blueprint for a movement meant to change individuals and society.
So true understanding isn't just intellectual.
He argues it's impossible to grasp its deepest layers from a purely theoretical distance, like just studying it in a seminary or a quiet room somewhere.
That feels counterintuitive for purely academic study. You're saying to really get it, you have to try and live it.
That's the argument. To understand its depths, especially the parts revealed during struggle and community building, you need some practical engagement, trying to call others to God, trying to implement its principles, facing opposition, dealing with community issues, experiencing echoes of the challenges faced during revelation, like at Badr or Uhud.
Without that practical dimension, some aspects just remain abstract.
Yes, you miss the lived context, the emotional weight, the sociological relevance of many instructions.
Okay, this idea of action connects directly to a common criticism, doesn't it? The lack of detail objection. People say, okay, fine principles, but where are the specifics? How exactly do we pray? What's the precise tax rate? How do we structure the economy? They want a detailed rulebook.
And this is where the source brings in that brilliant engineer blueprint analogy. It's essential. The Qur'an, it argues, is primarily a book of principles, usul, and generalities, qiyat. It defines the fundamental framework, the boundaries, the hudud orbit.
It's the blueprint.
It's the blueprint. It's not meant to be a minute instruction manual covering every single specific detail, every juz'iyat.
So if the Qur'an is the blueprint, who was designated as the chief engineer to actually build the structure according to that blueprint?
God sent the Prophet Muhammad for exactly that role. He was the official engineer tasked with taking those divine principles and practically applying them, demonstrating how to build the model society, how to live the guidance.
And that practical demonstration, that lived application, is the Sunnah.
Exactly. The Sunnah of the Prophet's way is the build structure. So the source argues, complaining that the blueprint, Qur'an, lacks fine-grained detail while completely ignoring the existing built structure, Sunnah, demonstrated by the authorized engineer. Well, it's missing the point entirely.
That really clarifies the intended relationship between Qur'an and Sunnah. Okay, one last area that causes confusion: differences in interpretation. Ikhtilaf. If the goal is guidance and unity, why are there so many scholarly disagreements?
This needs careful clarification, and the source provides it. The Qur'an severely condemns destructive division, tafruq. This is factionalism born out of ego, tribalism, or deliberate distortion, leading people to break away, declare others outside the fold, and shatter the community. That's condemned as a spiritual disease.
But that's different from scholarly disagreement.
Very different. Healthy scholarly disagreement, ikhtilaf yurai, arising from sincere effort to understand the texts, exploring different possible interpretations of legal points or nuances in meaning, that's not condemned.
As long as certain conditions are met.
Yes, crucially, as long as the scholars maintain respect for the core principles, obedience to God and His Prophet, and remain committed to the overall unity and well-being of the community. The source actually suggests that this kind of good faith intellectual exploration, this ikhtilaf, is a sign of vitality.
A sign of a thinking, engaged community grappling with a rich text.
Precisely. It shows the depth and breadth of the guidance that allows for reasoned differences on subsidiary matters, while uniting on the foundations. One is sickness, the other is health.
What a journey. We've gone from that initial feeling of why does this jump around to understanding the context. It's a guide for a movement. The Prophet is the practical implementer. It focuses on principles over exhaustive detail, and action is key to deep understanding.
And maybe one final point the source touches on, tying back to the text itself, is its historical preservation. Stepping aside from theology for a moment, purely from a historical perspective, the argument made is that the evidence for the Qur'an's textual integrity, how it was recorded, memorized, cross-checked, and standardized very early on under Caliph Uthman into the Mus'haf,
That evidence trail.
is arguably stronger and more verifiable than the evidence we have for the exact transmission of text detailing, say, the full extent of the Roman Empire or Napoleon's campaigns. It's a claim about remarkable historical continuity.
A very strong claim about its unique place in textual history. Okay, that leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. If the source is right, if truly deep comprehension of this text requires practical action, requires amal, what's one specific, maybe small, practical step you could take starting today based on its teachings that might actually deepen your understanding? Something to think about. Until next time on The Deep Dive.